Welcome, gang. Here we are on our mission to Eve. Yeah, we finally did it. We did Kethane refinery on Eve. Why? Because I'm an idiot. I don't know why we did this. I've never before done a return trip from Eve. I've put guys on there but never brought them home. So this was kind of a final, let's do it, we're gonna make it happen. So here we are lifting our Kethane refinery. This is a mining and conversion unit all in one. It's atop our heavy lifter, our backbone of our fleet. This heavy lifter has done a lot for us. I condensed this entire mission into about a 17-minute clip. This was about 3 weeks of my life putting this thing together. So many failures, but we finally did it. We made it. Well, this is, it is what it is. So we make it, we put our refinery out on Eve, our trip to the purple planet. Beautiful shot there coming into Eve. The total project was 4 separate launches, all within the same window, juggling crafts back and forth. The first was a satellite probe that for mapping Kethane and finding Kethane. The second was a very failed attempt at rovers on Eve. It was miserable, it failed, and we didn't even include it here on this view. But this is our third craft, our refinery, coming in onto a big patch of Kethane. My rovers were supposed to scout out a good mountainous zone that had Kethane on it. They failed miserably, so I'm kind of going on blind faith here that this will be high enough to get us off of Eve once we get down there. And the goal was to get it at 3,000 meters or above. So once we land on Eve, we then lift the landing gear and drive it to the top of this mountain, or as high as we can go before my patience runs out. And we sort of got there. We got to about, I forget what the exact number was, 3,200 meters, somewhere in that range, 3,176 meters. We drop off our landing stage, and we'll have Jeb clean this debris up here soon enough. But that's it. There we are. We've got our refinery on Eve. Ta-da! We are going to refine some Kethane. When we did this the first couple of times, we had trouble with the wheels on Eve. It's a lot more weight pushing down on them, and so what I had to actually do is leave that landing stage on it and use it to slightly lift the weight off while I drove. A pain in the tuchus, yes. So let's switch back over to our next craft. This is our taxi cab. This is actually going to meet up in orbit with the rest of our lander stage. The taxi cab's main job is to get us from Eve back to Kerbin. We do use it to help us push our way to Eve, but that ship, the lander craft that we're going to meet up with here shortly, that actually got to Eve under its own fuel. So we burn all of our fuel getting to Eve, and we land an essentially empty craft. It was a risky maneuver. We shall see if it pays off. I don't know how well we did, but we did it. We learned quite a few lessons in this. Number one is that juggling a bunch of crafts going through the same encounter was a little bit more of a nightmare than we liked, but we did it. We made it work. You can see here we are taking our taxi cab over to our lander craft, which we're going to meet up with here in just a second. And there it is. This enormous cluster of fuel tanks and engines is our lander craft. It has its own set of problems that we discovered, but for now it is what it is, and we're going to say goodbye to the rest of our fuel. We're not going to have any excess fuel on this trip. That is going to go home. I had a tendency of bumping into things in orbit, right there. You'd think that I would get better at that, but I'm not. So there we are, pushing away from Kerbin, saying goodbye to our home world, sending this thing on to the purple dot, using the fuel in that lander stage, going to burn it all up, and finally at Eve. I cut out all the maneuvering and orbiting stuff. I'll leave that as an exercise to the reader. You guys know how to encounter Eve. If you don't, it's an interesting concept. The atmosphere at Eve is great for aerobraking. Once you get in orbit, we're going to leave our taxi in orbit around Eve, and we're going to drop this bad boy down on the surface. And bumping into things along the way, of course, because that's what we do. We bump into things. Jeb, learn to drive, buddy. We get ready to burn, and remember, we're burning all of our fuel in our lander stage. We are not going to have very much left at all, so we have to land this precision landing next to our Kethane refinery. We need everything to go absolutely perfect, so we check for damage to make sure there was nothing out of the ordinary, frequently using the F3 key to check to see if there's any damage, and thankfully no, and you can see we're getting close. We have a bunch of wheels on the bottom of this to drive us to where we need to go, but we still have to get close. Again, the lessons we learned from our Kethane refinery is that the added weight on Eve means wheels are not as good as they could be. But here we go, coming down. We are going to be really close. I think we nailed this landing about less than 3 kilometers, maybe 2.5, 2.3, maybe even as close to 2.2 kilometers. I don't remember the exact number. This, like I said, this was about 3 weeks of my life trying to put this all together, and it's a little fuzzy at times. We almost stranded Jebediah on Eve multiple times. We finally figured out a way to get him home. But here we are coming down, parachutes, glorious parachutes, popping open. There they are. And set us down gently on Eve. Again, just to make sure we get this absolutely perfect, we're going to go ahead and fire up the engines, burn a little bit more of that fuel. We have more left than I thought we would. Parachutes did a great job on Eve. We'll go ahead and burn as much fuel as we can just to slow us down so there's absolutely no chance of breaking anything. Setting us down onto the wheels. And there we go. Wrong way, Jeb. Wrong way, Jeb. Reverse, reverse, reverse. Go the other way. There we go. So here we are at 2.2 kilometers. Not bad at all. This did require some painstaking driving. Had to keep the speeds correct, otherwise we'd pop tires, and then Jeb would have to climb out, fix the tires, climb back in. A very meticulous process. So we just kept the speeds low. We drove slowly. A quick saved often. I'm not ashamed to say it. Quick save often in case we have spontaneous disassembly. Luckily, we were able to make it in one piece, mostly. We had an issue with one of the landing legs, but there it is. Driving beautifully across the face of this beautiful purple planet. Our refinery in the distance. Jeb is getting excited by seeing that refinery. He knows that he has a chance to make it home. He's not going to be stranded, or hopes he's not. And look at that, isn't she beautiful? Alright gang, so coming up, we get to see Kerbal Attachment System, KAS. This is a cool mod. I don't use all of it yet. I'm still learning the nuances. It's got a lot of parts that I have not taken advantage of yet. Mostly, I wanted to use it to connect ships to transfer fuel. Use it like a fuel hose. And for that, it works perfectly. Jebediah is going to climb out, he's going to set foot on the planet, and he's going to fire up that fuel hose and connect these two ships. Now, we did have a problem with taking off. I'll go over that in a little detail, but essentially, I don't know if it was a design flaw, if it was the thicker atmosphere, the heavier gravity, what it is, but whenever we tried to detach the landing gear, they would pinch the ship as they fell in and destroy engines. They'd spin us out of control. Lots of problems. But there we are, Jeb planting a flag as the only Kerbal ever to touch the surface with the hope of going home. Nobody else has ever had a chance, and you know what, to even attempt to go home, and Jeb does. He's very excited about the possibility of going home. So we plant our flag. We took some time, off camera, I took a lot of time just wandering around the planet, looking at the sights. It's a beautiful purple color. It's a neat little place. I'm in a hilly area, so not a lot of the water to float in. But we're going to climb back on our craft once it's all fueled up. Another challenge is All of the little tanks on there had to be filled up individually. I'm going to spare you the pain. We're going to jump cut right through all of this. But we fill our ship back up using the natural resources we find on Eve. We're going to climb aboard our our rocket. This is a rocket ship. A rocket, interplanetary rocket ship. We're going to climb aboard it using these what seems like a million of these aerospike engines. But all of that structure or truss. Put the two words together. So all of that structure is going to get left on the surface. You can see some of the glitching here. So we go ahead and we just decouple most of these, detach these landing legs, as many of them as possible. I don't know if the full weight of the fuel has caused problems, but we're going to detach as many of them as possible before we fire up those engines and detach the last little bit. This is just enough to hold us in place and go. Let's go home. A lot of these little tanks drop off, and it amazes me, just amazes me, the amount of fuel required to get even to 10,000 meters, to get to 10 kilometers. I mean, we're climbing up, we've got all the engines burning, we've dumped all of our drop tanks, and we just barely make it to 5 kilometers. So all of our engines burning furiously. I did not have enough reaction wheels on this, so if I was not pointed straight up, we would have issues. This launch took multiple attempts to get it correct, because if I slightly pitched over even a little bit, and you can even see some of the glitches that we had, the engines would cut out at different times and try to pitch us over into a roll. But we were able to hold it together. Jeb, the great pilot that he is, held it together, pointed it straight up until most of the mass of this ship dropped. We finally break that 10 kilometer. We're heading to 20. And it's when it starts to dawn on you, you don't have a lot of ship left. You hit the 20 kilometer mark and that's it. That entire craft, all those engines, all the work, everything, it's all gone. This is it. This is what's left. And you hope it's enough to get you into orbit. You're finally getting through the thick atmosphere. You finally hit the 30K mark. You start to pitch over to the side as hard as you can to start burning sideways. But is your apoapsis going to be high enough? It is a scary, scary thought, knowing that all this work and you might not make it. But of course, with Jebediah at the helm, what can go wrong? This tiny little pusher stage is what we have left. This is the last stage before we are on our emergency reserve fuel. Checking our apoapsis, watching it climb up. Got our fingers crossed this whole time. We did the math. We did the simulations. We did our homework. But in real life, did it work? And that's it, that little bitty craft burning up, burning through most of its fuel. There's not much left. It's about this point when I realize we're gonna make it. We are gonna do it. We're gonna use just about every little speck of fuel we have on board, but we're gonna make it. Our apoapsis is correct. Our insertion stage is running out of fuel, but it's okay. We've got our emergency backup, and we use about half the fuel that's in our backup. We end up with about 15 units left on board when we finally reach perfect orbit, and that's it. So Jeb sticks his hand out the window and hails a taxi. This our rendezvous with our taxi cab, bringing it in. We use the RCS on board the taxi cab. The Eve craft has no RCS, so basically our taxi rendezvous with us, which is perfectly fine. And it's at this moment in time when I realize something very, very scary. We have no parachutes. Yeah, that's right. We have no parachutes. So the emergency SOS beacon is sent home. Jeb's calling home. Hey Bill, hey Bob, I need some help. What have you got? Well, it just so happens that we were also building a space station around Kerbin. We had to quickly make some drastic changes to it to make it serviceable, but we did it. We got it launched into orbit fast enough. This first stage was already in the planning to be a bigger space station, a science platform around Kerbin, It is by no means finished. It's barely just begun, and it was supposed to have a whole different section here at the bottom, but we ditched that bottom section and put a giant docking port so that our taxi cab can meet up. Because luckily, this space station was designed with escape pods. Not a lot of escape pods, but enough. So Jeb decides that he's going to commandeer one of these escape pods, which has landing gear and parachutes, which is what we need. He says goodbye to his home. He says goodbye to his craft that has been his home for the last, oh God, for a long time now. And he climbs into the emergency escape pod, says goodbye to this beautiful little platform, tries not to bump into anything again, and he burns for home. It's at this moment that my wife, who has been patient with me for these past 3 weeks while we've been putting this project together, is looking over my shoulder, and she is elated that we're bringing her little buddy home. Jebediah, through all of his trials and tribulations, is headed home. Burning through the atmosphere, we got the parachute popped out, a little prematurely, but it popped out. We are coasting down now. Jeb realizes he's got a little bit more fuel left, so being the amazing pilot that he is, he goes ahead and gets himself as close to home as he possibly can to make his rescue that much easier. Landing gear out, parachutes out, a great shot of home in the background there. Again, using the F3 key to make sure there's no damage, just in case. And there she is. We have made it. We are home. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.